When executing Visual Basic code, the chances are quite high that you will have at some point in the past triggered an error. Chances are that as you've been experimenting during this title, that you'll have created errors. Now, effectively, there are three types of error. There are syntax errors where you've effectively typed something wrong. Those errors are fairly easy to spot because when you try to execute the code, something goes wrong. You go into the code, you spot what's wrong and you fix it. There are then two other types of error: runtime errors and bugs, which are programming errors. So they fall into two different camps. Let's have a look at how we can stop runtime errors. Well, let's not say stop, how we can catch an Excel runtime error, which is completely unhelpful and usually unintelligible to the normal user, and replace it with a much more user-friendly error. So if we use the error trap file available in your working folder, you'll find that this has already a little snippet of code, a subprocedure called cubeRoot, that will work out the cube root of the active cell and place that result in the cell to the right. So you can see here, X takes the value of the active cell, Y then works out the cube root of X, moves to the right, so one cell to the right, and then places the value of Y in that cell. I've also assigned a keyboard shortcut to it, which is Ctrl-Shift-Y, so that we can make use of it very quickly. So if I were to place 27 in A1, and then do Ctrl-Shift-Y, I get 3 in B1, because that's the cube root. If I were to place 64 in A2, Ctrl-Shift-Y, I get 4, because that's the cube root of 64. That's where it stops getting easy. If we were to pick on some randomly large number, 8756, Ctrl-Shift-Y, the cube root is actually 20.61113546, depending on how many decimal places you want to be accurate to. So that works quite happily, and we could select 4 and proceed with the cube root of that, and it'll work that out in the next cell along. So everything works fine until we try and do something that the subprocedure is not capable of, such as working out the cube root of a negative number. I've got -4 there, Ctrl-Shift-Y, and we hit our standard error message here, runtime error 5. This means absolutely nothing to anybody using the program, and they have a choice of ending the code or debugging. Now they could click debug, it will drop them into the code, and it says the problem's here, but doesn't actually explain what the problem is. So let's reset that, go back to Excel. So it can't work out the cube root of a negative number, and we get that awful Excel error message. We'll also get the awful Excel error message if we try to cube root a piece of text. My name, for example. So Guy, Ctrl-Shift-Y, and we hit the same problem. A different error number, 13 this time, because we've got a different error. Last time we were trying to cube root a negative number, now we're trying to cube root a piece of text. Again, choice either to end or debug. Well, debug will just drop me against that line there, end takes me back into Excel and nothing happens. Now we could continue with other problems that could occur. We could perhaps be in the last cell on the right hand side, and we won't be able to move to the right. That would also cause this procedure to fall over. So what we need to do is either build into our little routine here all the possible errors we could think of catching. So is X a negative number? Is X a piece of text? Is X the last cell on the right hand side? And any other possible variations that would not work, that would cause an error message to crop up. Or we go down the simple route and we capture all error messages and deal with them en masse. So how do we turn our little subroutine here so that it can handle any error that might occur when it runs? Well, right at the top, after declaring the subroutine, we need to add a new line that says on error go to, and I'm going to ask it to jump to another part of the subprocedure so that it knows where to go. I'm going to give that new part of the subprocedure a label. So I'm going to say on error go to root. Now I can call my lumps of code anything I like. So this root is effectively a label that refers to another part of the procedure later on. Now when I do my return, you'll see we get all the color coding that takes place and the right title casing. So it's on error go to root. What I then need to do further down procedure is firstly tell it when it's done all that current code there to exit the sub-procedure. Otherwise, it will run straight into what I'm going to do next, which is the root. I then need to use the root as a label. And so that the VBA knows that it's a label, I simply place a full colon at the end of the line there. So root. This is now the label that we will jump to if we get an error. Notice how it left a line there dramatically. And for simple sake, we will just put out a nice little message statement. Sorry, an error occurred. Please try it again. Now, in reality, I ought to be a bit nicer than that and make suggestions about what could have gone wrong. Have you used negative numbers? Have you tried to use text? Are you at the end of the sheet? Those kind of things. But for the moment, we're just going to say, sorry, an error occurred. And then that will take us to the end of the subroutine, so I don't need an exit at this point. Let's see if that works. So I take my cell with Guy in, Control-Shift-Y. Sorry, an error occurred. Please try again. Let's put a negative number in. Control-Shift-Y. Sorry, an error occurred. Please try again. If I put in an actual positive number that it can work out cube root for, I get the result. So we can see the error trapping is working. Now that's a fairly straightforward error trap. On error, go to root, which is a label for further down in the code. Further down in the code, I then put root with a colon so that the VBA knows that's a label. And then between effectively that colon and the end sub, I put as much as I would like. That could be message boxes, it could be input boxes, it could be logging the information somewhere else, so you've got a store of all the errors that take place. The important bit here at the end of the normal code when there isn't an error is the exit sub, so that when these commands are executed, when it gets to that line there, then jumps out of the subroutine. It doesn't continue down to then put out sorry an error occurred when actually one hasn't occurred this time. So this is a nice simple error trap that really you ought to add to all of your sub-procedures, just in case somebody puts something in that the code cannot execute.